Wouldn't have learned enough for that in the 5 years since I was here. We didn't stay long enough, for one thing. On decivilized planets that were visited by space Vikings, the locals picked up bits and scraps of technology very quickly. In the 4 months of idleness and long conversations while they were in hyperspace, he had heard many stories confirming that. But from the level to which Tanith had sunk, radio and screen communication in 5 years was a little too much of a jump. "You didn't lose any men, did you?" That happened frequently. Men who took up with local women, men who had made themselves unpopular with their shipmates, men who just liked the planet and wanted to stay. They were always welcomed by the locals for what they could do and teach. "No, we weren't there long enough for that. Only 350 hours. This we're getting is outside stuff. Somebody's there beside the locals." Dunnan. He looked again at the battle stations board. It was still uniformly red-lighted. Everything was on full combat ready. He summoned a mess robot, selected a couple of dishes, and began to eat. After the first mouthful, he called to Alvin Carford. "Is Paul getting anything new?" he asked. Carford checked. A little contragravity field distortion effect. It was still too far to be sure. He went back to his lunch. He had finished it and was lighting a cigarette over his coffee when a red light flashed and a voice from one of the speakers shouted, "Detection! Detection from planet! Radar and microray!" Carford began talking rapidly into a handphone. Harkiman unhooked one beside him and listened. "Coming from a definite point, about 25th North Parallel," he said, aside. "Could be from a ship hiding against the planet. There's nothing at all on the moon." They seemed to be approaching the planet more and more rapidly. Actually, they weren't. The ship was decelerating to get into an orbit, but the decreasing distance created the illusion of increasing speed. The red lights flashed once more. "Ship detected. Just outside atmosphere. Coming around the planet from the west." "Is she the Enterprise?" "Can't tell yet," Carford said, and then cried, "There she is, in the screen. That spark, about 30 degrees north, just off the west side." Aboard her, too, voices from speakers would be shouting, "Ship detected!" and the battle station board would be blazing red. And Andre Dunnan at the command desk. "She's calling us." That was Paul Koreff's voice, out of the squawk box on the desk. "Standard Sword World impulse code. Interrogative, what ship are you? Informative, her screen combination. Request, please communicate." "All right," Harkiman said. "Let's be polite and communicate. What's her screen combination?" Koreff's voice gave it, and Harkiman punched it out. The communication screen in front of them lit at once. Trask shoved over his chair beside Harkiman's, his hands tightening on the arms. Would it be Dunnan himself? And what would his face show when he saw who confronted him out of his own screen? It took him an instant to realize that the other ship was not the Enterprise at all. The Enterprise was the Nemesis twin. Her command room was identical with his own. This one was different in arrangements and fittings. The Enterprise was a new ship. This one was old, and had suffered for years at the hands of a slack captain and a slovenly crew. And the man who sat facing him in the screen was not Andre Dunnan, or any man he'd ever seen before. A dark-faced man, with an old scar that ran down one cheek from a little below the eye. He had curly black hair on his head, and on a V of chest exposed by an open shirt. There was an ashtray in front of him, and a thin curl of smoke rose from a cigar in it, and coffee steamed in an ornate but battered silver cup beside it. He was grinning gleefully. "Well, Captain Harkiman of the Enterprise, I believe. Welcome to Tanith. Who's the gentleman with you? He isn't the Duke of Wardshaven, is he?" 8. He glanced quickly at the showback over the screen to assure himself that his face was not betraying him. Beside him, Otto Harkeman was laughing. "Why, Captain Valkenhayn, this is an unexpected pleasure. That's the space scourge you're in, I take it? What are you doing here on Tanith?" A voice from one of the speakers shouted that a second ship had been detected coming over the North Pole. The dark-faced man in the screen smirked quite complacently. "That's Garvin Spasso in the Lamia," he said. "And what we're doing here, we've taken this planet over. We intend keeping it, too." "Well, so you and Garvin have teamed up. You two were just made for one another. And you have a little planet all your very own. I'm so happy for both of you. What are you getting out of it, beside poultry?" The other's self-assurance started to slip. He slapped it back into place. "Don't kid me. We know why you're here. Well, we got here first. Tanith is our planet. You think you can take it away from us?" "I know we could, and so do you," Harkeman told him. "We outgun you and Spasso together. Why, a couple of our pinnaces could knock the Lamia apart. The only question is, do we want to bother?" By now he had recovered from his surprise, but not from his disappointment. If this fellow thought the Nemesis was the Enterprise— Before he could check himself, he had finished the thought aloud. Then the Enterprise didn't come here at all. The man in the screen started. "Isn't that the Enterprise you're in?" "Oh, no. Pardon my remissness, Captain Valkenhayn," Harkeman apologized. "This is the Nemesis. The gentleman with me, Lord Lucas Trask, is owner aboard, for whom I am commanding. Lord Trask, Captain Boak Valkenhayn of the Space Scourge. Captain Valkenhayn is a space Viking." He said that as though expecting it to be disputed. "So, I am told, is his associate, Captain Spasso, whose ship is approaching. You mean to tell me that the Enterprise hasn't been here?" Valkenhayn was puzzled, slightly apprehensive. "You mean the Duke of Wardshaven has two ships?" "As far as I know, the Duke of Wardshaven hasn't any ships," Harkeman replied. "This ship is the property and private adventure of Lord Trask. The Enterprise, for which we are looking, is owned and commanded by one Andre Dunnan." The man with the scarred face and hairy chest had picked up his cigar and was puffing on it mechanically. Now he took it out of his mouth as though he wondered how it had gotten there in the first place. "But isn't the Duke of Wardshaven sending a ship here to establish a base? That was what we'd heard. We heard you'd gone from Flamberge to Graham to command it for him." "Where did you hear this? And when?" "On Hoth. That'd be about 2,000 hours ago. A Gilgamesher brought the news from Zox Chittle." "Well, considering it was fifth or sixth hand, your information was good enough, when it was fresh. It was a year and a half old when you got it, though. How long have you been here on Tanith?" "About 1,000 hours." Harkeman clucked sadly at that. "Pity you wasted all that time. Well, it was nice talking to you, Boak. Say hello to Garvin for me when he comes up." "You mean you're not staying?" Valkenhayn was horrified. An odd reaction for a man who had just been expecting a bitter battle to drive them away. "You're just spacing right out again?" Harkeman shrugged. "Do we want to waste time here, Lord Trask? The Enterprise has obviously gone somewhere else. She was still in hyperspace when Captain Valkenhayn and his accomplice arrived here." "Is there anything worth staying for?" That seemed to be the reply Harkeman was expecting. "Beside poultry, that is." Harkeman shook his head. "This is Captain Valkenhayn's planet. His and Captain Spasso's. Let them be stuck with it." "But look, this is a good planet. There's a big local city, maybe 10 or 20,000 people, temples and palaces and everything. Then there are a couple of old Federation cities. The one we're at is in good shape, and there's a big spaceport. We've been doing a lot of work on it. And the locals won't give you any trouble. All they have is spears and a few crossbows and